Schierke Origins, Berserk's best magic user and the reason Guts can use the Berserker Armour. Explored. In a fantasy story, magic is usually one of the first things introduced in an effort to capture and retain the reader's fancy. This is partially true for Berserk. We do meet Puck, a magical creature, in the very first chapter, and you can say that the process of becoming an apostle or a god hand is part of magic, but magic proper is introduced at around the halfway point in Berserk, and it's done through the best girl of the whole series. Schierke makes her debut sitting under a tree and observing Griffith's incarnation from a distance, but now she's in the thick of things as the Black Swordsman Party's resident mage and astral world guide. She has grown from a sheltered, timid child to a self-confident witch who will turn you into a monkey if you test her patience. Just ask Isidro. But Schierke's role in Berserk goes beyond being an expositional character for magical events and the witch of the group. Her relationship with Guts is an echo of another bond from years ago lost to the fog of time, and it's going to be crucial to the endgame of Berserk. So, without further ado, this is Schierke's Origins. Explored. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A premonition and a purpose. Schierke's introduction to the story. Out of every proper member of the Black Swordsman Party, Schierke is the last one to be introduced to the story, but her first appearance is perhaps more significant than even Farnes's. Where Farney's debut coincides with our first hearing of the prophecy of the Falcon, Schierke's coincides with the birth of said Falcon himself, or more accurately, his first step in the new world that is about to come. As Griffith and Zod lay waste to the Kushan forces besieging Shet, Schierke takes control of a bird with her luminous body and watches as humans and apostles alike gather to his banners. She flies away thinking that she has just witnessed the savior of the world, the Falcon of Light, making it evident that she is at least aware of the dream that signaled Femto's incarnation. But then she changes her tune and wonders about the prophecy we spoke of earlier. In the scriptures of the Holy See, it is written that when the sun dies 5 times, a red lake will appear west of a city with a name both old and new. It's a sign that the 5th angel will alight. This angel is the Falcon of Darkness, the master of the sinful black sheep and the king of the blind white sheep, who shall call down upon the world an age of darkness. Schierke suspects that the Falcon of Light and the Falcon of Darkness are one and the same, and either way, it's a good idea for her to observe him from another body. When Ivalira asks her why she used a bird to confirm her suspicions, Schierke says that nearing the force field was dangerous in her luminous body. She'd have found herself lost within the astral world if she approached Griffith that way. Her cute elfin companion calls her tough to read as always, but one of the latest chapters of Berserk explains this with a visual representation that's easy enough for even a baby elf to understand. Spoiler alert, but when Griffith attacks Elfhelm with Zod and his apostles, Schierke notices that his Odd, his astral life force so to speak, is so strong and magnetic that it feels like a massive maelstrom. If Schierke had used her luminous body, which is a projection of her astral self, to go anywhere near Griffith after his incarnation, she'd have gotten sucked into his Ode like the abyss swallowing the souls of the damned. By anchoring herself to a bird, she was able to prevent this from happening. This shows that despite her insanely youthful appearance, Schierke is an advanced magic user. She was able to accurately deduce the true identity of the incarnated Femto, and was smart enough to anchor herself before going anywhere near him because she did not want to get stuck in the astral world. That makes her our perfect magical guide for the world of Berserk. But that's the premonition that only half of our title covers. What exactly is her purpose in life? Well, that's something even Schierke can answer properly. It seems as though her purpose is to defend people from evil astral spirits because her next appearance is in chapter 197, where she's asked by Ivalira what she's going to do about the trolls attacking Isidro, Casca, and Farnese. Chapter 198 reveals that she chose to save them after driving off the troll attacking Isidro with her consecrated berries and protecting all of them with a magical ritual that sent the trolls back to where they came from. She explains that she used her own hair as a catalyst for fire elementals that attacked the troll as if they were being pelted by fire arrows, but asks the group to leave the place for their own safety. When Isidro tells her that they are used to fighting monsters, she politely vibe checks him by telling him that his swordsmanship could get them all killed the next time they chance upon trolls. The stone thief is offended by this and goes to lunge at who he thinks is an old hag, but trips up and ends up groping Schierke instead. This This pisses her off enough that she hypnotizes Dropey into thinking he's a monkey. Thus begins a friendship/rivalry which we suspect will come to define Schierke down the line, but that's for a later section. Schierke wonders why Guts' companions could see the pentagram her spell conjured, and also questions why both Guts and Casca feel different from the others. It was as if their spiritual selves were attracting distortions in the flow of Ode, which we know was their brands of sacrifice attracting dead spirits, but she didn't know this yet. Neither did she know just how integral the man she was observing was going to be in her life, because as causality would have it, Guts turned out to be her purpose and her fate. Losing her mistress and finding her fate, Schierke's journey into the outside world. After saving Guts' party from a troll attack, Schierke heads back to her home, the Spirit Tree Mansion. This interstitial location is protected by a ward that only allows its caster to step within its barrier, which is why Schierke is more irate than confused when Guts' party finds their way into her safe haven, along with an old man called Morgan from the nearby Enoch village. The young witch sends elemental golems after the intruders, all the while wondering if Guts and Casca's special odes were the reason they were able to find the mansion in the first place, or was this too an effect of the Falcon's appearance. She intends on allowing the golems to tire them out completely, but somehow, Guts' party seems used to fighting all the time. When they figure out the trick behind the elemental golem's regenerative magic, Schierke prepares to use something more powerful when she is stopped by her mistress. Upon her teacher's instructions, she brings the Black Swordsman party into the Spirit Tree Mansion to meet her mistress, the witch Flora. It is revealed that Schierke herself is actually a witch in training, and this becomes a trigger for one of her many squabbles with Isidro. Flora is the witch to whom the Spirit Tree Mansion belongs, as well as Schierke's absolute loyalty, because the young apprentice cannot stand even perceived insults to her mistress. When Isidro expresses astonishment at the fact that Flora looked so different from the stereotypical image of a witch, Flora laughs and thanks him for the compliment, but Schierke calls it insolence, letting us know that this young lady cares deeply for the magical old lady who is teaching her the ways of the Magus. Schierke and Flora's relationship is more like that of a mother and daughter than a master and apprentice, and this is why, despite disagreeing with her mistress's instructions on occasion, Schierke follows them anyway. For example, she dislikes Guts' party and humans in general for their general ignorance of the astral world and its many wonders. She particularly has beef with Isidro, whom she calls vulgar and crude for casually speaking of Flora's imminent death, even as she is forced to cooperate with him. But Schierke has too much respect and affection for Flora, so she quietly accepts her responsibilities for the night, which include preparing dinner, healing baths, and introducing herself without being impolite or attacking their guests with golems. Oh, and also she is going to help Morgan and the Enoch village with their troll problem whether she thinks she's ready or not. Flora trusts her disciple and has faith in her skills, and so she requests Guts and the rest to look after her as she finds her own path in the outside world, because she will have to do so soon enough. As noted earlier, Flora's life force is fading, and she doesn't have long in this world. Schierke is deeply upset at the prospect of losing her mistress, but also secretly excited to shut up Isidro once and for all. That night at dinner, Schierke displays her immense knowledge of the way of magic in the astral world as she explains the 3 overlapping realms of existence to the group, and the reason behind them being able to sense and perceive Puck and Ivalira. She also knows about the brand of sacrifice and why it is carved into the flesh of humans, which is why she thinks to herself that Guts must either be delusional or unenlightened to the ways of the astral world. The fate of the branded is to sacrifice every drop of their life essence to the dark entities that await in the abyss. Schierke asks him if he is going to defy angels and devils that can determine the fate of mankind itself, and Guts tells her that he needs to punch them where it hurts one day with a friggin' smile. She thinks it's crazy to try to change something you can't control, but as always, her mistress anchors her to reality. She tells her favorite student to always remember that while God might bestow fate, it is upon man to decide if he wants it or not. As proof, she points out the fact that despite being branded by the Falcon of Darkness's will, Guts is still alive. Flora predicts that this encounter with the Black Swordsman is going to show Schierke her true fate, and though her disciple is very apprehensive of this statement at first, she will eventually come to accept it as truth. After giving Guts' companions a breakdown about how thought transference and elemental weapons work, Schierke leads them to Enoch Village, where the troll attacks have been taking place. At first, she vehemently rejects Guts' ideology of doing as she wishes to. Schierke has grown up with Flora and is a highly sheltered mage who views the outside world with contempt. She finds humans to be disgusting as their new religious path, that of the Holy See, is trampling upon the reality of the world, which is that magical spirits are actually more common than we think. Enoch Village's church stands on an altar dedicated to a nature spirit called the Lady of the Depths. The Holy See has a habit of building churches upon actual sites of magical magical power in the world, and it reviles Schierke to no end that they have the audacity to praise God while stepping on his most cherished creations. Her mistress Flora shares a similar story. She used to be very active in that area as a healer and agriculturist who taught several villagers how to reap a bountiful harvest and saved countless lives with her healing magic. But when the Holy See came down upon the world, Flora was ostracized from society as a witch. This is why Schierke can't take Guts' casual talk about doing whatever she wishes to now that her mistress is nearing her final moments, and she considers him to be as far as possible from her destiny in the world. And then the Black Swordsman does his Black Swordsman thing, and Schierke starts to see the wisdom behind her mistress's words. Here is a man who, without any magical abilities and only a giant sword tempered by malice, is taking on hundreds of trolls and an ogre by himself. And he is impressed with Schierke's invocation of the 4 elemental kings, something she later calls a basic spell that all mages in training master early on. She makes a mistake when communing with the Lady of the Depths and loses herself in the tidal flow of Ode, being brought back thanks to Ivalira and Farnace's quick thinking and action respectively. However, because of her mistake, Casca and Farnace flow away with the water that cleanses Enoch village of trolls, and Schierke is very aware of how accountable she is for this blunder. But instead of chastising her, Guts commends her. He is thoroughly impressed by Schierke's magic and trusts her to lead the way to Casca and Farnace, who are missing but safe according to her sensory abilities. This faith in her abilities makes Schierke blush, and thereafter she develops an innocent crush on the Black Swordsman, which Ivalira is sure to bring up every time Schierke's emotions towards Guts start welling up. She becomes even more impressed by him when she learns that he had actually managed to hurt a God Hand member's physical manifestation with his Dragon Slayer. Schierke is in 2 minds about Guts and his party being her fate, but that decision is made for her when they return triumphant from Clipoff. Flora's Spirit Tree Mansion is attacked by Griffith's war demons, and Schierke is one of the first people to notice this because of the disappearance of its magical barrier. The child mage's emotions crumble as she realizes that her mistress is about to die, and she rushes towards the burning mansion with Isidro and Serpico giving chase. Schierke is so shaken by her mistress's imminent death that she can't even cast magic properly anymore, but at that moment, Flora's thoughts reach her. She instructs her favorite pupil to bring the Berserker Armour to the Black Swordsman, and just like that, we find out one of Schierke's primary roles in the story. The Berserker Armour isn't actually just an armor. It's a magical object imbued with a terrifying ode that eats its wearer alive if they're not careful when using it. As a disciple of one of the best magic users to have ever lived, Schierke is the only one capable of guiding Guts' mind through the vortex of darkness induced by the armor, and saving his ego from total collapse. Schierke refuses to accept Flora's end in the physical world because she was the only person she had known her entire life. Flora was like a mother to her. She'd spent many an hour lying in the witch's lap and having afternoon tea with her and the golems as they both existed in a serene commune with nature. She does not want it all to end in flames. This is when Flora reminds her that death is only the end of a magic user's life in the physical world, and that she has broken many natural laws by living as long as she has. The Witch of the Spirit Tree reassures her favorite pupil that they will meet again in another form of life, and that is that. Flora cannot witness her disciple's bashful smile, which is her final wish in life, but she can be proud of the bashful spirit she has passed down to her. Despite technically being a novice and a child, Schierke is not only able to guide Guts to the armor safely, but she also succeeds in helping him gain control of it. She is blessed with a few final words of wisdom from Flora in her fire demon form before the old witch dissipates into the astral world. Charging her with the responsibility of witnessing her own fate alongside Guts, Flora thanks her pupil for giving her the most serene days of her long life and bids farewell to her sunshine, telling her that they will meet again in her dreams. Despite her low self-esteem, it's not an exaggeration to say that Schierke is the reason that we still have a Black Swordsman today, because on their way to Vritannis from Flora's mansion, Schierke will be the only person capable of halting Guts' berserker frenzy. Being the sole magic user of the group makes Schierke their residential expert on all things astral, and if she hadn't joined the story when she did, Guts' journey to Elfhelm would have been a lot worse. And we mean a lot worse. But finding her purpose in life and finding her place in life are two very different things, and Schierke learns this the hard way. The fate of a mage and the faith between friends. Schierke's part in the Black Swordsman's journey. After leaving the Spirit Tree Mansion, Schierke puts on a brave front and tries to act her usual collected self, but breaks down upon reminiscing about Flora in front of Guts. After letting all her emotions out of her self-made cage, she discusses the sea with him for a while, as Ivalira teases her about her crush on Guts. That is when Skull Knight shows up and makes an interesting observation about Guts and Schierke's relationship. If you've seen our Skull Knight video, then you know that he and Flora had been buddies for literal centuries. Skull Knight left the Berserker armor in her care after his life as a human came to an end, and he fought to defend her when Griffith assaulted her home. She thought of him as a dear friend, and he confirmed for Guts and Schierke that this was the case, before comparing their own friendship to his relationship with Flora. The Skull Knight warns Guts about the drawbacks of the Berserker armor, having been through them himself as a human, but to everyone's surprise, it's Schierke who speaks up for him. She reassures the Skull Knight that with her presence, no one has to worry about Guts losing control. Unfortunately, in the very next fight their party gets into, Guts loses control. Though Schierke manages to help him back, she doesn't realize that the Moonlight Boy had helped her out as well, and that is something that we will come back to later. It is also around this time that Schierke takes on Farnace as her own apprentice, after the latter practically begs her to do so. The little witch is surprised by how fast a learner Farnace is, and teaches her the ritual to summon the 4 elemental kings relatively soon into her witch training. This comes in handy when they set sail for the Isle of Skellig, but it is at the port city of Vritannis where most of her major character development takes place. Vritannis is the first proper large-scale human settlement Schierke has ever stepped foot on, and she's overwhelmed by it. Not to mention, she doesn't appreciate the city guards treating her like a witch because of her clothes, which were a memento from her mistress, so she uses her magic on them to gain entry into the city. But Isidro goes a little bit too far in teasing her, and as a result, Schierke takes off by herself. She comes across a hanging alley and puts the restless souls of the dead to rest. She then goes to the pier where she is heartbroken by the fact that humans had cut down countless trees to make weapons of warfare like ships. She starts communing with some seagulls to calm her heart when she meets a person who will be closely linked to her fate. And no, we're not talking about Guts. In Vritannis, Sonia the Seer witnesses Schierke lying those dead souls to rest and decides to go make friends with her. The two sit by each other and talk, where Sonia tells her a story about her life using birds and animals as placeholders for actual people. In her story, she was a kite that had arrived at Vritannis dejected because the falcon she desired had to marry the Queen of the Ducks. It's a whole thing that you should definitely go read in the manga. But along the way, she met an owl who was just as lonely inside as her, and she wondered whether they could be friends. She's talking about Schierke, of course, and the two magic users end up having a neat little adventure where they defeat a bunch of pirates and free captive Kushan children from a horrible fate. At the end of their adventure, Schierke is asked by Sonia if she would like to join her group. This is because she feels she has nowhere to go, but the young mage realizes that Guts has been following her the whole day to keep an eye on her, and she politely refuses. Schierke sees that she does have a place to go back to, and that idea is only reinforced when Guts calls her our Schierke at the inn they were staying at in order to fend off some drunken patrons. From that point onwards, she accepts Guts' party as her fate wholeheartedly, and gives her all to ensuring they make it to Elfhelm safely. If Schierke had not been beside him, Guts would not have been able to kill Daiba's Mega Pishacha Kundalini or injure the Dread Emperor Ganishka when no one else could, including Nosferatu Zod. It is only thanks to Schierke that Guts is able to retain consciousness when he descends into the heart of the terrible sea god they face on their way to Skellig Island. If she hadn't been with them when they arrived at their destination, Guts and co would have been run off the island by its magical residents, and Schierke even helps him achieve his heart's greatest desire. After meeting with the Flower Storm monarch Danon at Elfhelm, Schierke is the only one who ventures into the Corridor of Dreams with Farnace and Casca in order to restore the latter's mind. She is the one who leads the entire restoration ritual, and it is thanks to her mental projection of Flora's daemon form that she and Farnace succeed in recovering Casca's old self for her. She also casually witnesses Skull Knight's blood memory when she tries to pull Guts out of the Berserker armor in Hanar's hut. Once she gains confidence in her own abilities after getting reassured by the one man she seeks it from, Schierke becomes much more effective at using and teaching magic. But all that knowledge and skill falls short in the face of the Falcon of Darkness himself. When the Moonlight Boy first appears to her on that starry seashore, she assumes that it is an apparition of Danon that is evaluating their worthiness before allowing them to enter her utopian kingdom. Turns out that is actually Griffith every night of the full moon, as his body is taken over by the vessel of the demon child within it. When the Moonlight Boy appears in Elfhelm in the final volume penned by Mira, no one thinks too much of it, but crap hits the fan fast when Griffith transforms back into his regular self and kidnaps Casca before destroying the physical manifestation of Elfhelm in Fantasia. Schierke is powerless to do anything in the face of such great malevolence, and her sense of despair is only reinforced when aboard Roderick's ship, the Seahorse, where survivors are now gathering. Schierke is doing her best to help rescue and recover the injured residents of Elfhelm when she's told that Guts has been brought on board as well. She tries to communicate with him through thought transference first, and uses her luminous body when that fails, but for the first time in her life, she is rejected by him. The Black Swordsman even shuns all company as he falls into a deep despair after coming so close to getting Casca back and losing her to Griffith once again. At the moment, Schierke's last appearance in Berserk shows her to be terribly concerned for Guts as Casca is brought to Falconia by Griffith, but we'd argue that this is where her actual role in the story starts to pick up steam, and yes, we'll explain why we think that's so. She will be forced to make a tough decision very soon, and it will change her forever. Why Schierke is so important to Berserk's story. Kentaro Miura once said that Berserk is actually a 1,000-year-old story which is set in the current timeline. And that makes a lot of sense when you consider what Flora says to Skull Knight about fate in this universe. Flora believes that instead of being a circle, karma is a spiral where similar things occur multiple times across history, but the finer details are just different enough to make them two entirely different tales. If this is true, then her favorite disciple's fate is entwined with her own in a way that she herself might not have realized, because the Skull Knight isn't far off in thinking that Guts and Schierke are like Flora and himself. If this is true, then there is no doubt that at some point in time, Guts and Schierke's friendship will be tested by a major crisis of faith, and this is how we see it happening. Schierke is a child who has not known a parent for most of her life. Given how young she is, it's quite possible that Flora found her orphaned somewhere in the woods and decided to raise her as her own. As a result, she is formed rather deep attachments with the first group of people she has encountered in her life, especially Guts. Schierke acknowledges to herself that she does in fact feel attracted to the grown-up man, and shoves Ivalira into her hat whenever she brings it up in public, but she also knows that she can never be that way with him. Having gone through Guts' emotions and thoughts on numerous occasions thanks to her job description, she knows that Casca is the sole object of his affection. She resigns herself to being content with the fact that she can only control Guts in his berserker state, and while that's commendable for a kid, you must keep in mind that it's not exactly a resolution. The real reason why Miura added this child to the story might have been revealed in chapter 237, and you could have missed it entirely if you weren't paying attention. When the Skull Knight explains to Guts how the Berserker Armour eats away at its user until they're no longer human, we don't think he's just talking about the sweet embrace of death. We know from the story that Flora had done something taboo that caused her to be banished from Elfhelm back when Skull Knight was still the Skull King. We also know that the Skull King feels more elfin than human, thanks to Puck's empathy sensor. It's almost a given that the Skull Knight is a vengeful spirit that's roaming around in special armor made for him by Hanar, and this is exactly where the SK-Flora relationship becomes a mirror for the ones shared by Guts and Schierke. The Black Swordsman is currently in a state of despair quite similar to the one experienced by Griffith during his eclipse. What's worse is that he is going through all of this with the Berserker Armour on him. If we're interpreting the Skull Knight's words correctly, then when a person's life ends whilst wearing the armor, they only die in the physical world. Their astral selves are stuck within the interstice as a vengeful wraith fixated on the last thing they died doing, and it's possible that Flora used her magic to bind Skull Knight's wraith to the armor he is wearing today. If push comes to shove for Guts, and it's looking like shoving season aboard the Seahorse, Schierke might be his only hope for remaining human. Whether she is able to help him out or not is a different story, because the little witch is in for a rude awakening the next time she meets her kite friend. Sure, Schierke, Isidro, and Yzma have a lot of drama potential brewing between the three of them given the implied love triangle that Miura was working on before his death, but to us, it will be more interesting to see her reaction when she meets Sonia again. At this point, Schierke knows that Griffith is the Falcon of Darkness. She knows his innate nature, she knows he is the reason the world is in a state of fantasia, and though she might love magic, she abhors it being abused so flagrantly, and that too for selfish reasons. Schierke is like a magic gatekeeper, but one who is justified entirely in her attempt to gatekeep. So imagine how she's going to feel when she realizes that the girl she thinks is her friend is actually the medium of the very Falcon of Darkness her mistress had warned her against. We've already seen that Schierke cannot perform her magic properly when she's under great emotional stress. She was practically useless during the attack on the Spirit Mansion tree, and who knows how she would have fared against the Sea God if she would have gone inside his guts with someone like, say, Isidro. She has taught Farnace a fair bit of advanced magic, and it's true that the former Holy Iron Chain Knight might be able to take over for her in a pinch, but that pinch is what we're calling the linchpin to Schierke's big character moment, because something has to happen to shake up the status quo even further. As of this moment, the Seahorse is being pulled into a whirlpool in the ocean, and Schierke is completely helpless in the face of it. We think the only way that any of the Elfhelm refugees can survive is if Farnace and Morta pick up the slack for Schierke. But what happens after that? Berserk is entering its final stages, and a confrontation between Guts and Griffith is inevitable in the next major arc. If Guts goes to Falconia, so will Schierke. But what happens when she gets there and sees what she sees? That is why we're pulling our hair out waiting for an announcement from Studio Gaga or Kujimori about the continuation continuation of Berserk, because out of every interesting creature, apostle, and magic user in this world, we want to know what the Emerald-Eyed Mage's next move is going to be. And if that isn't peak character creation, we don't know what is. What we do know is that Schierke will be at the heart of whatever demonic ritual ends up transpiring in Berserk next. What her role in all of it will be is what we're waiting to watch. Marvelous verdict. And that's it for this video. If you want to give your kids a role model from a fantasy story that they should look up to, introduce them to Schierke. I mean, shield them from absolutely everything else about Berserk, but definitely make them meet this floofball of cuteness that can also clap you up in the blink of an eye with no apology. Flora's favorite disciple represents a pure connection to nature and all things spiritual in Berserk, and she also possesses the strong human will to keep moving forward on her path. Sure, she doesn't know a lot of things about the outer world, but she is confident in herself, and that is mostly thanks to her admiration for Guts. Schierke is the Flora to Guts' Skull Knight, and their partnership is honestly the most wholesome thing in all of Berserk, which is why we can't wait to see it blow up in a spectacular yet logical fashion, because if you didn't know already, that's kind of how the world of Berserk works. And though Schierke knows it, we doubt she's prepared to face it. That dissonance is where her character becomes so integral to the main conflict within Berserk, and we personally can't wait to see how she helps Guts fulfill his greatest desire, killing the fifth angel's incarnation in the physical world. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This has been Corey Whelan for Marvelous Videos. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.